welcome to Super Talk Show. It's so nice to have you
Hi, Heidi.
again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And I think we're like, what's the time difference between Poland and Japan? What time is it for you?
For me, it's 7 p.m.
For me, it's 12 p.m.
Right, it's a seven-hour difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so to start off the interview, do you want to introduce to us like who you are?
Right. So, I'm actually a senior at quite traditional Japanese high school. Um, it's in within the realms of traditional Japanese education. And I'm thinking of applying to college abroad. Um, I'm sort of looking into that process of applying to college in the United States right now. Yeah. That's the basics.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna keep going, but wow, that's interesting. So what do you want to talk about in this interview? Do you want to dive into your college application process or maybe like a reflection? It's
Sure. So I think I dive into to my interests, I'd say. Um, I've always been very interested in doing research. And so, when you get ready for college applications for the United States, you do all these extracurriculars and stuff, right? And so one of the projects I'm doing right now is I'm working with a photography festival that's held annually at the city I'm in. And I don't know if this is a well-known fact, but in photography festivals, sometimes they do things called a portfolio review, which is a sort of it's an opportunity for artists, newcoming artists, to get to know more senior artists, and also have them review their work. So you would have a pool of reviewers who are usually senior artists and you know writers of art that are well known, and you would have the newcoming artists, and sort of you'd match those two and have them do review sessions, which is usually very beneficial for the newcoming artists, and provides a good sort of cultural basis to the photography festival. And so I work with them, and so the project I'm doing right now is that it sounds quite obscure, but when you do the photography festival and the portfolio review, you have to, as I said, you have to match the reviewer with the person who gets the reviews, which we call reviewees, which are basically newcoming artists. And sometimes they prefer to be matched with a certain reviewer. Maybe that's because they like that particular reviewer, or that particular review is very known in a certain area of art, of photography. But they have these preferences. But then some reviewers would have a lot of people that would want to be reviewed by that person, but that reviewer's schedule is very limited because these are very busy people. And the amount of reviewers that the photography festival can get, because it's a pretty local event, although it is an international photography festival, but it's still based pretty locally, so we don't have the sort of economic capacity to go out and somewhat hire a very large amount of reviewers.
Yeah.
So the resources are very limited. And then it becomes a problem of how do we allocate the review sessions, because there are two very important constraints, which is, first of all, the number of reviewers, and second of all, the time that the reviewers have. It's very restricted. is usually a 2-day session. So you'd usually have about, I think, 24 time slots. So you can't, and then there are lots of people who want to get reviewed from all across Japan and the world. So you have to sort of be able to match those people. How we traditionally did this is we traditionally did this by human mind power. So a certain person who was in charge of that would take around 2 months or 3 months to do all those matching with,
Whoa.
like hundreds of spreadsheets and whatever,
Wow.
which takes so much time. It's very painstaking stuff to do. But what I thought of is that I believe that we can automate this in some
Artificial intelligence.
right, right. So then it does touch into artificial intelligence, which is the most basic of this problem. But I think so. What's interesting, what I found very interesting is this because is that it's actually a very scalable problem. Scalable in the sense that portfolio reviews, they do things that are like that in the structure of the problem across the world. Maybe that's in other art festivals, or maybe that it's in other systems that have to match people to other people. But also it's a very interesting question about how can we do best with very limited amounts of resources. So it's sort of an optimization problem, which is also another big broad field that you can work in. So that's what's very interesting to me right now. I feel like I'm talking a bit too much. Do you have any like questions or anything?
I do. So are you like identifying a problem and you're trying to, I mean, I would assume that you already have a solution to it, but like, how does this relate to you? I guess that's what I'm questioning.
Right. How does that relate to me? So I think generally, when I was doing extracurriculars and stuff, I'd sometimes see people who aren't enjoying the things that they do. And I think it's important that you actually enjoy whatever you're doing at, say work or whatever project you might be doing. And I think there are certain things that are more enjoyable to humans, and those things are usually are the things that humans are actually better at doing. But in this case, I think it's the case that machines are actually better at doing that, solving that problem, and it's more it's not a particularly satisfactory
Work. Job.
experience to actually work on that problem. Yeah,
That's true.
as a human being. So that's my core belief, is that if humans can't enjoy it, I think machines should do it. Right. And I became friends with the person who was actually working on the problem with 100 spreadsheets and putting in 2-3 months. Yeah, I actually befriended him. And we talked about it, and he was literally it was first his idea to sort of oh, I wish I could automate this because I could be doing much more important work in other places. So that was basically the idea. It's basically for this one person to get some load off his shoulders.
Yeah. Okay, so are you trying to create like a machine learning algorithm that sort of solves this human labor problem by making it a machine work, not a human work?
Right. So it does touch upon artificial intelligence. I haven't brought it up to the level of sophistication where where you can say it's machine learning. But what I use is called a genetic algorithm, which is basically, it's a very crude way to solve problems in the sense that the process is a bit like, trial and error, until you get like a good solution. So it's not the best. I actually don't think it's the best way to solve problems. And because I'm working on a problem that's actually gonna have to do with how humans interact. You have to always think about the human aspect of it. For
Like,
example, what do you, yeah,
like what? What
yeah.
human?
So for example, what do you do when an emergency occurs? For example, um, what if a certain reviewer has uh, suddenly has something to do that day and can't open that time slot within their schedule? Now you have to reallocate the review sessions to some other reviewer. But that work, you don't necessarily want to do that all by algorithm, because logistically it's going to be a bit difficult, because with the way that the algorithm solves the problem, it solves it as a whole. So if you want to move one piece, there is a possibility that you have to move all of the other pieces, which will completely jumble up the schedule that you had in mind, which is not great for people who actually administer the thing. So you have to think think in the future and think about those possible emergency scenarios and sort of account for those and say, okay, how can we make the life of the people who administer this schedule more easier, even if an emergency occurs? Now, if you come up to that level of sophistication, I think you introduce things like machine learning, which I haven't got to yet, but I certainly think it's a very interesting area to go to for now on. But I think I'm still not in that process yet. But yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. So I guess I want to ask, like, how do you see it? I don't know what you're trying to do with this, but if you do actually make, I don't know if it would be a software, a web app, or like what, but how do you see that transforming, the job market? Or what I'm asking is like, what do you think
Right.
people who had that job will do now? Like the human implication of that.
Oh, and had the job had the job of scheduling things.
Right. Like,
Right.
what happen?
Okay. So in this particular case, with the Fairy Festival, um, usually the people they hire are hired um just for the job, basically. So it's not like a permanent job offering. So it's
Oh,
usually
oh,
part-time work, basically. And because their economic or their financial resources are very restricted, it'd be very much beneficial to be able to reduce the amount of wages they have to pay. So it'd be very beneficial to introduce, for example, a machine that would do that for them in that case. And also,
sorry.
uh,
It
in
is
our
hardware
software,
a software. So okay, because you
yeah.
brought up machine. I was like machine.
Oh
Okay,
yeah, no. Yeah. It's software.
software.
But yeah, and also the person who's actually working on this scheduling problem was actually a photographer himself, and he knows a lot about photography. So he would be very valuable in somewhere, for example, in designing a venue or producing the photography that's there, right? So that's a much better use of the limited resources that the photography festival have
Yeah.
has. So in this case, it's very beneficial. In the more broader sense, I think scheduling to a certain extent is something that's more when you bring up the complexity to a certain level. I think it's much more easier for computers to solve rather than for humans to solve, and humans make errors, obviously. but as I said, and as you said, there is always a human factor in administering the schedule. So in that sense, you have to have like a very human-friendly schedule that you can easily administer, and that's where I think humans sort of have to. That's
Interview.
why humans have to design, right? Design the whole system. Yeah.
Mm. Okay, that's cool. So if you do happen, I don't know, do you have any name ideas for the software that you're creating? Or where do you see this go? Like, how long do you think you'll be able to create? Or let me ask, do you have any coding experience or like any experience
Right, right.
doing similar things?
So what's funny is that I actually had some coding experience from school,
Mm-hmm.
but the languages we used were pretty arcane, and not necessarily useful. Um, well, not the best languages that you can use to solve problems like this.
What language
Um,
did you
and
learn?
so I was language that I
HTML?
learned. So um, I think we did pretty basic um, algorithm stuff. So that we cut across many languages, and um, we looked at the very basic structure of algorithms in school. But the main language they would use was Perl, actually. I don't know if you've heard of it,
I
but
heard.
it's a pretty old language. What I currently use is Python because it felt user friendly, and I wasn't particularly great at coding, and I wasn't like I felt the urge to learn to code first, but because I wanted to solve this particular problem, it sort of motivated me to
Learn.
learn coding as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So when did you learn coding? Like in high school or middle school and was it like an
Uh,
in school class or like were you just learning it out of school as an extracurricular maybe?
yeah, it was high school in school.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a class. Yeah, but usually with these classes is that you forget what you learned basically, so you have to sort of relearn. And in my case, it was because I was solving a problem that I was motivated to solve. It
Mhm.
was much easier to learn. Yeah.
Mm. So how far are you in that process? Like, did you already, I'm hearing that you're relearning it. So are you like starting to code it already? Or I don't really know what's going on inside the algorithm, but it sounds pretty
Right,
cool.
right, right. So I'm trying to build the first prototype for this because the actual real life problem is very complicated with a
Right.
lot of parameters.
Yeah.
Um, for example, because we also do online review sessions, there's also the parameter of, for example, how many MacBooks would the Apple store at this particular city in Japan provide us for this particular stretch of time? And that could be two or three, and that would, basically changes the whole problem. So there are those, parameters that you can't necessarily predict. But I think what I first want to do is build a prototype that sort of explains what I want to do to the people who actually administer the scheduling,
Oh,
so that they get a better understanding of what problems might be solved, and what progress has to be made and what progress has already been made. Yeah, so I'm trying to make the first prototype, and it's very important to sort of communicate with the people who are actually administering the thing, because there are very, at one point when you design the algorithm, you have to have um, objectives in mind. So what do we want to optimize for is the main question. Do we want to optimize for the experience of the reviewees? Do we want to um, optimize for the smoothness of the operations? Do we want to optimize for um, minimizing risk, or whatever? Yeah, so it's still in the prototyping
hmm.
stage.
Mhm. Okay. So I guess do you have like any contact? I know you know the photographer who is doing the job that you're trying to like ameliorate. Do you have any contacts with like the people who are, behind this operation? I don't know.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Because we work at the same photography festival. Yeah, I can contact anyone.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay. How long do you expect this to be?
I think it depends on how sophisticated I want it to get. I think it also depends on how well. I think I can stretch this to a very big project. Because I sort of look at this problem as one, it's a problem that should be solved because it benefits people, but also it's a problem that I want to solve because it sort of benefits me in the sense that I can learn about things and I can explore things.
Yeah.
Um, so with the thing I mentioned about accounting for future emergencies, for example, that type of thing can get to pretty sophisticated stuff. If I want to go there, I could take a lot of time, maybe years perhaps. But if I want to have something very simple, then I could cut it short. But I think I intend it to be as a pretty long term project because I think there are the basics of what I would do can be applicable to any other fields
Mhm.
outside art festivals and stuff. Yeah. For example, I think the most big impact example might be something like um what's a good idea? For example, the coronavirus vaccines, for example. Um they use algorithms to allocate well, the United Nations had this, I don't know if you know this, but the United Nations had this um operation with an institution called Gavi, the what was it? Vaccine Alliance, to sort of support lower middle income countries and low income countries to procure vaccines for the coronavirus, or for COVID, not the coronavirus. And when they did that, when they tried to allocate various kinds of coronavirus vaccines to certain countries, they sort of made a clearinghouse that was run by algorithms. And that is, for example, a good example of how matching needs to supplies is done through an algorithm which is designed by humans, right? So it's basically a similar structure to what I'm working on right now. So I think it's broadly applicable to more
Mm.
bigger scale real world problems. Yeah,
Mm.
so that's why I'm very interested in it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So do you think, are you, or should I ask, like, are you more working on a project that solves just one problem or also an entire template maybe that can solve multiple problems if people plug it in correctly?
Right. Right. So I think um it's I strike a balance between those two, because you know it's hard to argue that this one problem that a certain photography festival in a certain city in Japan can be, a solution to that can be applicable to any sort of
Yeah.
matching problem in the world. But I think some of the insight that I might get from solving this particular problem is in fact applicable to solving other large scale problems. But there's obviously a gap in sophistication, or skill,
Hmm.
skill of computation. So there is a gap that needs to be filled, and I think I can do that, through learning things in the more theoretical world. And also, I think what I want to do is I want to talk to people who actually hands-on work on those large-scale matching problems, for example. If I get the opportunity, which I will try to get, hopefully.
Wow, that's interesting. So essentially, you're not okay. I see. I see where you're going with this like entire project. So how do you balance that with like school and college application? Because I know it's like a really busy, bizarre time for you. And when did that idea formulate? And
Right.
what?
So yeah, so it started really from this March, I think.
This
Um,
March? Whoa.
yeah,
Half a year ago.
I yeah. I'm still working on it. But I try to work on it when I feel most motivated to work
Mm,
on it, because sometimes it's a bit too complicated to work in one sitting. So I try to cycle around the things I have to do. For example, write essays. And
yeah.
I don't know if you experience this, but when you write essays, about yourself, you feel like you're not being very productive because you're just looking into yourself and being sort of self-reflective, which is obviously a very important thing to do. But you don't feel like you're making output, right? So
Mhm.
when you have like a long spell of writing essays, you feel very motivated to solve outside problems.
Mm.
And in those spouts, you get the most productivity. So yeah, I guess that's how I operate, I guess.
Mhm. Okay, I think I'm running out of questions. Is there any questions? I know we have 8 minutes left. Or
Right.
I always ask my Superior Talk Show audience, like, what's one tip you would give to the guests? But I don't know if that's applicable in this case because you're basically like pitching an idea. Yeah. Thank you for being on the Super Talk Show. I think that's it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun talking to you.
Okay. It was
All
quite
right.
an interesting interview. Not sure if I can call it an interview though. Conversation, idea pitch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think I talked a bit too much, maybe. Yeah.
No worries. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.